I think you need to get how long are you doing for this song? Which is great. There's no ready. After that. Play. You ready?
Give it a few more seconds.
Make sure you introduce this thing. Okay. Make sure you stay HOA 77.7. Make sure you add HOA 77.7 in your intro. Hey guys, this is Shulie. I don't know. Okay, this is. About to start streaming on YouTube.
Okay.
Ready? Okay. Give her a countdown. Give her a countdown. Give her a countdown. 3, 2, 1.
It's Speak It Thursday. I just made that up, y'all. But hi, I'm Shulie, and I'm live on HOH 77.7. I am excited. Surprise, you guys. I have now joined with the HOH 77.7 team to bring Speak It to people all over the globe. I am so excited to be here. Welcome to my guests. Welcome to those who are coming in the studio. Come on in. Have your seat. We are getting ready to speak it tonight about healing us. We've had so much going on in this world, and it's just time for us to talk about it. We've had the news cycles going nonstop, and we have our guest in the studio, Dr. Richelle Whittaker. Everybody give her a round of applause.
Good evening.
Love, and you can do that by sending up some hearts. And then we have Mike Dangerfield, but he's not dangerous.
Not dangerous.
Love. He's here representing for men's mental health, which is so important. And Richelle is here. She's representing for mental health as well. And she has love for the moms and the children. And they are here to help us navigate. Let's see who we have in the house. We have Houston in the house. We have Miss Johnson. Hey, y'all. And we're doing something different tonight. We're doing something a little different. We're going to have to do some commercials, which we haven't had commercials before. I'm just letting y'all know what's going on over here. So I'm on radio time, and I'm in here clowning. My producers are looking at me. I'm clowning. So we'll have some pauses. But let's go ahead. Let's get ready to speak it. Y'all ready?
Let's go.
Let's do it.
Okay, let's do it. Okay, well, people are still coming in and they're dropping their cities. Just come on in and have a seat. Let's go ahead and talk. And we're going to start out with Dr. Richelle Whittaker. Welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Like they say in church, you're welcome once, twice. You're welcome, welcome, welcome. Give us some background. How did you fall in love with mental health?
Oh my goodness. Thank you for having me. This is great. Love the new setup you got going. How did I fall in love with mental health? That is an excellent question. No, what happened was back probably like in high school, my friends would always come to me for advice. And so I mean, not that I necessarily had the answers, but I gave them the best advice that I could. And then I took a psychology course in high school and I fell in love, and I've been in love ever since.
Okay, lovely. So you fell in love, giving that good advice, and now you're here helping the masses. You've written a book, you have done seminars and workshops, and now you're here to speak with us. So thank you so much. Thank you. All right, Mike. When did you first fall in love with mental health?
I wish mine was as flowery and nice as Dr. Whittaker's, but mine was a longer journey. So, growing up in the hood, graduating, going to the military, having the opportunity to kind of serve my country, I fell in love with working with people, just diverse people. I've always been a different kid, wanting to know what makes people tick and trying to understand them better. So when I came out of the military, I was searching, how do I bridge the gap between, being a helper to people and helping myself at the same time. And guess what? Mental health came knocking. So I started off with working with juveniles, and then one thing led to another, and education just kept growing. And I'm just like, I got to help educate my people. I'm learning so much. I got to give back. So.
Well, I thank you both, because you are essential, and I'm sure you know that by now with everything that's going on. The mental health topic has, I think, gone to another level. Of course, last month was Mental Health Awareness Month, but we find ourselves now in America like for you, Mike, with all the changes. So first we have COVID, and now the racial pandemic has gone to another level. What has it been like for you, Mike, with your practice?
It's been interesting. So I'll say that working with men primarily is a challenge in itself, just because we don't naturally, volunteer, hey, let's go talk about our feelings and let's get emotional and vulnerable. So right at a time where things were kind of picking up for me, and I was, kind of getting men on board, because the women were getting on board and getting their men on board, the moms were getting their sons on board. Then COVID happens, and then everything is virtual. For me, I won't say it has been a bad thing, because the population I work with, African American, especially men, a lot of them are, not at a point to where they're, bragging about going to the clinic, right? So some of them have actually found it pretty convenient to be able to, us have a virtual session or talk behind closed doors. For me, it hasn't really impacted me. I didn't think I would like doing just virtual, because I'm a very personal kind of face-to-face person. But, I want to meet my people where they are. And so if this works for them, then hey, I'm with it.
And what about you, Richelle? Well, I want to call you Richelle. Shut up. What are we calling you tonight? We calling you Dr. Shell.
Whatever you want to call me.
Okay. Just call you.
Yes. So for me, when the pandemic hit, I had a lot of clients calling in, new clients calling in. And then when school shut down, it was like, I have kids at home. I'll just wait until you're back in the office. I don't think anybody thought it was going to be as long as it has been. And so, clients started to say, well, I'll just wait, or I don't really like virtual. And then there was an upsurge, because they started realizing, okay, shoot, like this is going on for like months, and I need to do something. And then it kind of tapered down, and now there has been another uptick. Everything that's going on, I think it's just kind of exacerbated their mental health issues that they were trying to hold off on. Everything happening, and the extended time of this has just kind of, the racial kind of things that are going on has just kind of exacerbated the things that they were like, well, I'll just sit on this right now. So, now there's an uptick.
Yes. Now, with all of that said, the things that you were talking about in terms of topics, and I know that you can't get into personal topics, but how have those discussions changed inside the room, whether it's a virtual room or not, where people had concerns about life and they were coming to you about certain things? Like for you, Dr. Shell, I know that postpartum depression, and you were helping new moms to navigate situations. How have those conversations changed?
I don't necessarily know that they have. So for some clients, kind of what is happening is affecting them in real time. But a lot of what I'm seeing is that the stuff that they were dealing with and having to deal with all of this other stuff has exacerbated their stuff. So their stuff didn't go anywhere. It's just that it kind of got put on a shelf because they got, stuck in having to deal with COVID. And so what's happening is that them being with COVID and then the things going on with George Floyd and all of this racial tension has just brought their issues more to the surface, or it's becoming so that they can't deal with it. It's becoming overwhelming and they aren't able to deal with it. So I don't, for some clients, everything, I'll say everything, COVID has affected everyone, but the racial tension and things like that is not affecting all of that's not necessarily a topic of conversation. For some it is, but for a lot others, it's more about, oh my gosh, like everything maybe kind of related to that, or I won't say related, but just the fact that you're an African-American and you going to work every day and you got life stressors. It's kind of more of that, I would say, than necessarily, because it's really nothing new for us. So it's just that now you're seeing it. Everybody's seeing it for themselves. So I don't necessarily know that the racial tension is just bringing their stuff to light. Like, okay, I got to get in. I need to see somebody. Whatever I got going on, I'm 10 times worse now because of everything else.
That makes sense. So it's exacerbated. And like you said, whereas maybe you thought you could have done something else, or you thought you could. Men's, and your specialty is men's mental health, and with the myths, and then we have stigma in our community. Can you talk a little bit about myths that we have? And both of you can actually sound off on this, but particularly with men and mental health, what are some myths that you would like to dispel tonight?
Oh, that's a good topic, a hot topic. So for men and mental health myths, I'm a poke fun at Ice Cube. Back in the day, our jam, one of his jams was, "If you're scared, go to church," right? And so it's interesting that for the African American community, churches is usually the staple of how we deal with things. You go to church and pray about it, and maybe talk to someone at church about it. But so for us, mental health is usually equivalent to weakness. And so because men are often groomed and told, that you don't show your emotions, you take it out on the field, you don't let anyone see you cry and all this kind of stuff, be a man. Those types of things, are opposite of what, you experience in therapy. And these are real things that men actually feel, so when you consider what's going on, and my responsibility is to try to connect with them to help normalize that, to get them in. So weakness is one of those things. Let's see what else. If you go and talk about what you're feeling or what you're experiencing, then you must be crazy, right? The reality is, we all got a little bit of crazy. It depends on how you define it, right? And then how you define normal. Right, like what's normal? That's an ever moving target, right? Let's see, what else are some of the myths? Basically, if you speak that you have an issue, or you speak that you have something you're dealing with, then you're speaking that you are unable to be a man. You're unable to take care of being the quote unquote provider, or being the one to always have it together. So a lot of it actually revolves around that whole being weak and being unable to hold it down, quote unquote, hold it down and take care of your family and all those.
Wow.
Those are the biggest myths. Yeah.
Those are some serious myths. Okay, Richelle, you had something to say?
Yes, I was going to say a huge myth, but I was like, I don't necessarily know that this is necessarily a myth. I mean, it plagues the Black community, but I wonder if it plagues men like it does women. Because the one that I would say is like, just pray about it. You don't have to go to therapy. Just pray about it. Just tell Jesus about your problems. Mike, do you find that affects men the same way? Because we know what the makeup is of church. So
that is something that we commonly hear for a man. That's not something that is going to register and make a break, him. But at the same time, it is something that's common. I mean, I've even heard that as well, growing up in the church, and being active in the church. Oh, just pray about it, and the reality is, prayer by itself without the action, just like the faith without the works, you know.
Faith without works is dead.
Right,
Yep.
right.
Well, go ahead, Richelle.
So I would say the other thing is, just talk to your girlfriend. You don't have to go see a therapist. Or what I've heard clients say is, I talked to my girlfriend and she was like, why are you paying that lady? I could have told you what she said.
All right. So we're going to talk about this some more. We're going to a commercial. You're live on HOH 77.7 with Dr. Richelle Whittaker and Mike Dangerfield. We'll be back with you soon.
Man, we were really getting right into the conversation. I was like, no.
Yes. Still hear you. They can still hear you on Facebook. Hey, Facebook. And we can pick up with that conversation after the commercial.
Okay.
So we have 2 minutes.
So,
Okay, thank you. Okay. All right. So yeah, we have some questions. So go ahead in the audience, use this time to actually drop your questions. If you have any questions, if you have any comment, we're going to come back and pick up with this conversation because we need to address all of these myths. I want to hear you guys' responses when we come back. We'll be back live on air in 1 minute.
and your next break will be 45 minutes. So you have 30 minutes to speak.
So it's going in and out. Okay.
Yeah, that's your part, yeah.
That's what I finally tuned into it. When I was like, that's the clock they're watching. So we're behind the scenes. Thank you all for joining me for the first live show on HOH 77.7. You're here on the Facebook Live, but you can always tune in at www.hoh777.com or get the app.
20 seconds. 20 seconds.
Okay. And we are back with the second half of the show. We got into a great conversation on myths in the Black community surrounding mental health. We can't just talk about the myths without bringing in the truth. Let's go ahead and talk about it because Richelle, she was getting worked up. We were talking about praying about it. For those who just tuned in, welcome. We're here to heal us. We have so much going on in the world, and it was time for us to have this conversation so that we can gear up for success. And we know we have a proven track record as a people for overcoming and surviving. But what do we do with this trauma, unprocessed trauma? But before we can talk about it, let's talk about these myths. Let's put it on the table. All right.
So one of the things that I think that we have notoriously done, when I say us, I'm saying like the church, is that we don't do a really good job of addressing mental health. I think maybe in the last few years, some churches have done a better job about starting to address it. But I have even heard some preachers in the pulpit, and I don't necessarily know that it's registering with them, but they'll say, if you're depressed, tell Jesus about it. So then people hear that and they're like, what? You know, like I said, I don't necessarily know that it's intentional because the word depression is used so loosely.
Absolutely.
But if you're somebody that's experiencing depression and you hear that, you're like, what? Because every time I hear it, I cringe. Like, no.
Yeah.
Mike, what do you say? What do you think about that?
Yeah. So I'm with you, Dr. Richelle. I'm heavily involved in church, and I'm avid about communicating. Hey, like there's a connection between spirituality and mental health. Like, let's not overlook that. We do a young adults group on Wednesdays and a marriage group on Sundays, and I'm all about incorporating mental health into it. In fact, the minister at our church, he's very forward thinking, and he says things like, okay, so the Bible is a what book? not necessarily a how-to. So you got to recognize that the step-by-step instructions are not necessarily given all the time in the Bible. And then I come behind that and say, hey, we got to realize, church, that the same God that gifted you to be able to preach and teach and stuff, God gave that doctor, his or her ability to be able to disseminate all this information. The same way you would go to the doctor if you were sick and not just go on faith and pray about it. Why would you not seek some how-to instructions on dealing with mental health things? And honestly, mental health is all throughout the Bible. I love highlighting.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is so true. It's in the word, but then also it's in the world. Like you said, God has gifted us with people to help us through these things. And I've heard it so many times too. Well, I'll pray about it. Or people say, like you said, go pray about it. And I'm so glad that the conversation is out there and we're talking about it. And I think the other piece that came up, the myth that you talked about, Mike, I would put it in the category of toxic masculinity. I've heard that. Don't cry. Can you talk about it? Can we talk about that in the truth?
Yeah. So toxic masculinity, that's good. So in the African American culture, I would just say part of the struggle already is the lack of male presence, right? Like for so many of us, our dads were not necessarily around, and if they were around, they were working so much, and so it's almost ingrained in us, when we interact, when we talk. We talk to our moms, our moms, be the ones we can open to, mama's boy and all this. That's cool when you're young. But when you're going to school and interacting with your peers, now, for you to be interacting with, your peers and being cool, it's not so cool to talk to mom anymore. So then the disconnect kind of starts, and then you spend more time with your coach, and it's more like, you take that aggression and all of what you feel out, on the field. That's how real men do it. And this, if you want to be able to stand. So throughout that process, nobody's reinforcing communication, acknowledging that you do have feelings for a reason, being able to communicate them appropriately. And then still, sometimes there's a disconnect between, the men. And so we go to typically the barbershop, that's where we let all our stuff. Or we're on a video game. That's pretty popular now. Guys get on a video game and play each other. And that's a safe space, but the conversation is still not had. So there's just this toxicity that's built up, and there's no effective way to let it out. Until men especially start to realize that, man, this, like, you got to talk about some of that stuff. It's there. It's there. Get it out. Let's get it out. And so
that's good. Do you have
with boys it starts? Oh, I was going to say, with boys it starts young. So I used to work in the schools doing testing, and so you'd have so many, especially Black boys. You have so many Black boys referred for special ed testing because of behavior, and behavior is just an expression of something, right? And so one of the reasons why I was like, I'm leaving the district and I'm going to open my own counseling practice is because I wanted to have all those kids who I felt like were in prison in these behavior classes to address the emotional parts of, of themselves, because no one was addressing it. It was like, we're going to put these kids in this classroom and deal with their behavior, but their behavior is a symptom of something else. It's not that they're just bad kids. And most of the time, a lot of times it was their environment that was it just wasn't consistent. It wasn't structured. And so, you're trying to have me test a kid, and I'm like, it's his environment. There's no disorder here.
Right.
So that just carries on into adulthood.
Yeah. Bad boys become bad men. And then you have all these expectations of them when they're adults. Like, but they didn't get educated. Nobody helped them to work through that stuff.
And handled differently, like you said. It's handled much differently. And what do you do? So unique approaches for both. So with young men or young boys in elementary school, like you said, with the testing, or if they come to you, Richelle, I want you to talk about that. How do you approach it at a young age? And then Mike, how do you approach it now that it never was addressed? So we want the lifespan, young boys and men.
So, what I try to do is help talk to boys about what they're feeling, right? I mean, I have sons. And so I try to talk to my sons about what it is that you're feeling. Like, it's okay to be angry, but it's something underlying that. There's a feeling that goes with that. What is that? What is that you're feeling? And a lot of times, I mean, adults don't always have the language. So, you have to use an emotion, card chart that shows like the different emotions, or even talk to them about what they're feeling. I find that with my older son, I have to do a lot of coaxing, right? Because I ask him a question and he'll just get silent on me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you're doing just like your dad. But I also recognize that it might take him a little bit more time to process, or he isn't able to tap into that, to the feeling. So then I have to start giving him feeling words, right? So that's what I find with a lot of young boys or elementary school age boys, that they know anger, they know sadness, and they know happiness. They don't really know a whole lot of other emotions. And so you have to help give them language for what they're feeling.
That's good. So you need the language, and then as a man, so you grow up and you don't get that. What are we seeing, and how do you handle it, Mike? We don't have the language.
Yeah, it's kind of the same way as Dr. Richelle said. So, I have that conversation about, how do you feel about this? And I don't know, angry, upset, and so it's then helping to connect the dots and giving them scenarios or analogies, or asking open-ended questions to get them to think about other feelings, and once we can have the conversation about other feelings, sometimes I just have to help them rephrase it or look at it a different way through reflecting. But it's a deep conversation sometimes, and it's a lengthy conversation, because you imagine, like Dr. Whittaker is saying, she's working with her boys, she's catching them, good, saying I feel good or bad is not, that's a common response. But at that age, you can break that down and help them kind of understand that it's not, let's go beyond that. But if that's what you've been doing and saying most of your life, into adulthood, no one's ever really checked you. Now you have to build a baseline to say, all right, tell me about a time when you felt, like uncomfortable. Tell me about a time when you felt like things were really great, and then helping to kind of, scale in between. And then you have a frame of reference,
Okay. And Eric Wiley says, the tragedy of American standards of manhood is that we are not encouraged to deal with our emotions in a healthy way.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And Richelle, you said something, you're doing just like your daddy. Let's talk about that, but not so you might hear that in different ways in terms of examples of that. And so I think it would be important to get in the conversation about generational things. So is it learned behavior? In the church, they talk about curses and blessings. So you have generational curses. What does that look like? Generational curses versus trauma versus learned behavior, however you want to break that down. Is it the same or different?
I think it's different. Well, if we let's just start with like learned behavior, right? That's something that you have seen somebody else do, and then you are imitating their behavior. Or so like I would say, like I've seen it where kids have a sibling that has a disability. Let's just say autism, right? And so their brother or sister has a lot of behaviors. And so then the younger sibling is doing the same thing, but you know that child doesn't have a disability, but they're around the other child, so they're imitating. That's learned behavior. The stuff that they're doing, they have learned that. Generational curses are like those negative repeated patterns. So like I would think a good way to illustrate this is Not Easily Broken. You all remember that movie with Taraji P. Henson and her mom? Well, her mom had got divorced, right? Because her dad cheated. And then when Taraji was having issues in her marriage, her mom was like, he not no good. Like she had all this bitterness, right? And so had she kind of stayed in that place, then she would have been just like her mom. They would have had had Taraji had a child, then she would have been just like her mom. And that's where that generational curse, kind of thing starts. To me, that's not the same thing as trauma. So, trauma to me trauma is it's damaging to the mind.
Right.
And it is from some kind of distressing event. So there's damage to the mind from some type of distressing event, like abuse. I was talking to someone who works for CPS, and the question was like, are you seeing a lot of abuse cases? And she was like, not so much abuse, more of neglect. And neglect is a type of trauma, right? So that's I'm gonna turn it over to Mike.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's still okay. You're breaking it down. We are learning today. We need to know the difference so that we can start the healing, and we want to use the correct terminology to address these things. So what do you have for us, Mike?
Oh wow! So Dr. Whittaker, open Pandora's box, so to speak. I'll tell you one of the things that I learned and love to learn about as I was getting schooling and stuff is learned behaviors and trauma. But conditioning was something that really registered to me, right? So I could talk theory about Pavlov's dogs and all that kind of stuff. If you ever had any experience with psychology, that was the study where basically stimuli, the dog was provided with just a bell, the dog didn't react, then the bell was coupled with some meat and the dog started salivating and all that kind of stuff. And so then you remove the meat and then just ring the bell and the dog connects the two together and
Right.
It's conditioned that way. So I think about myself, and what happens a lot of time from our lack of education and culture. I'll give you a prime example from my own house, right? So you think about a belt, right? A belt has usually a buckle on it. And for us, when we did something wrong, we got whooped. That was what it was in my house. So what happened was a belt buckle, you hear it jingling, right? And making all this noise. In and of itself is nothing. That's a belt, you're putting the belt on. But you connect, that noise with here comes a whooping, then you don't even need the belt a lot of times. You just hear that noise. And all of a sudden the anxiety and the panic. And I was that kid. Like I mean, any little thing made me cry. I was real sensitive. So I would hear that belt sometime and I was thinking, oh man, what did I do? What's wrong? You couple that with just Black men in society, and how we are conditioned sometimes and we don't even really understand it. So to be able to see the theory behind it and how it works psychologically is crazy. And then you think about generational curses. That's something that in the church you hear that a lot, and in the Black culture you hear that a lot. But so much as I've grown in education and learning and working in the counseling field, like I try to stay away from that topic, because when you say something like a generational curse, it's almost like you're saying this is something that you can't do anything about. Like it's just inherent, and you're gonna just have to deal with it because your daddy was like that and his daddy was like that, and that's just what we have to do. It is what it is. No. I'm all about if you can learn better, you can do better, right? So one of the things that they taught us way back in school was some theories call it family systems, call it like a family system or a genogram, and this blessed my life. And so what we had to do was you actually map out like your family tree. We do that anyway, but with your family tree you're using symbols and you're identifying traits, you're identifying relationship patterns, if there was alcoholism, if there was abuse, like just these little things. And with a map you can actually see and trace down almost throughout the generations where things are going on. And that visual sometimes helps you to say, okay, yeah, like, man, that was an issue, but that doesn't have to continue. Like I can be the one to learn and do better. And so for me, knowing that my experience was such, and knowing that a lot of us Black folks and Black men in general, our experience is such, I'm trying to find a way to connect that education, and that understanding provided in a way that's realistic and relevant. And so I'm passionate about that, because when we learn and understand, like, oh, that's what's going on, we can do something about it, right? And we don't have to just sit back and say, oh, that it is what it is. That's just how it's gonna be, I don't have no hope to get out the hood, or like that's how we deal with stuff.
The hopelessness. So is that the cognitive behavior therapy approach that I saw that's what you do? Is that how that works, where you identify the things?
Right. So essentially with CBT, what you have, or cognitive behavioral therapy, is you change your thinking about the situation. Sometimes situations happen and we have no control over them, but you do have control over your thoughts, which leads to the behavior, the feelings and the behavior. So if you can reframe that negative thinking into positive thinking, then you can change the negative behaviors into positive behaviors.
That's good. And we have somebody from the audience. Tony says that the geogram was a blessing to me as well, to identify the causative issues and to do away with some of the mythology surrounding our familial relationships.
Right on, Tony, right on.
And in the audience, we're talking about it. And now as we take the turn and we talk about systemic racism, this discussion is going on right now. Let's talk about that as it relates to trauma.
Woo! Where you want to
just had to dive on in on that one. There's no way to ease into it.
Yeah, that is, there is trauma that you can experience. I mean, there's a traumatic event that you can experience for yourself. And then there's vicarious trauma, meaning it doesn't necessarily have to happen to you, but it can happen to your neighbor. It can happen to someone you know. And it's almost as if it happened to you. And I think as a community, as a people, that is where we are right now. With the George Floyd, it's like we're here, and it's like, this could be me. I know for me, it's like, this could be my son. Like, so it's there, and it's difficult to detach from that, right? Because we can see ourselves in every racial injustice. We can see ourselves, right? Because racial injustices happen regardless of our socioeconomic status.
Right.
I don't know if you all saw the Oprah thing that she did a couple of weeks ago, but she showed this black man, and all of the things that he was experiencing. And then she got to the end of it, was like a commercial or video. He was a judge. So, it was just to show that he experiences the same thing that every other black man experiences, no matter what their job, degree, or title is. So that's the part that is so traumatic, that it's just, and it's generational, right? Because in 2020, I didn't think that this is something, to some degree, I didn't think that my sons I would have to be thinking about this for my sons. So.
Mm-hmm. And definitely I've heard this, and I don't know who said it, but we're only as sick as our secrets. And the way I see it is, we have a lot of secrets in this country, and they are in our face, and we are dealing with it. If we don't deal with it now, then it's going to deal with us, and it's here. I believe that this is a season of grace. If you want to get spiritual about it, we need to just stand in this thing, feel uncomfortable, and deal with it.
Right.
Because like what you're saying, I love how you even just describe the trauma versus the systemic racism. But let's talk about choices, because some people would like to think that because of the choices that we've made as a people, that it's happening to us. If you had only done this, if you had only done that. Talk to us about choices, Mike. Go ahead. Our child is in this.
Yeah. So I kind of mentioned earlier, when you know better, you do better. I do believe that, but at the same time, a lot of what we're seeing in society doesn't warrant the response, right? George Floyd's situation, this man losing his life, over a $20 bill like that, to justify somebody losing their life over anything is hard enough as it is, So for those who try to put it out there, like, if you just didn't do that, then you wouldn't have to worry about this. The reality is, we've all done something, and we all will do something, But at the same time, you empower yourself by learning and trying your best to do better. I think it's unfortunate, though, as Dr. Whittaker was saying, for African Americans, even today, whether you're a judge or whether you're like a boy going to a grocery store with a hoodie on to get something snack on, like it's almost like, African Americans in general, we're behind the curve. Like we have to, go above and beyond to make sure that we don't do anything that could be misconstrued, so that we don't have someone having some reasonable doubt about what we're doing and feeling vindicated and doing something. I know for me, I'm 6'4" and I'm about 280 pounds, and so just my presence, sometimes can be intimidating. And so, I have a corporate job as well, and I have to, like make it a point to always, that's who I am. But I feel like sometimes I have to go over and beyond to make sure that I watch my tone of voice. And, even if I'm frustrated, I don't, elevate or show any kind of gestures that I'm being hostile or anything like that. So I guess there's so much emotion I have behind that there's so many different things that we have to be mindful of. But the biggest thing is that the best we can do is educate ourselves and then try our best to use that education to respond, as best we can. Again, we're behind the curve, unfortunately.
Let's see, we have a comment that says, our men have been hurt and left behind by the very people who were supposed to love and protect them when they were kids. Now, many of their hearts have been so hardened that it's hard to feel. Woo.
Yeah.
Talk about the suffering, the male suffering. What's going on? How are we healing this?
So that is a very profound point, and one that I can relate to personally. In my own environment, like we talk about systemic racism, but I can tell you, even within our own culture, sometimes that there's this, this struggle to do you fit in or do you not fit in? Me going to the military, so struggling in my own environment to be successful without making other people look bad or whatever the case is. Then going to the military, being in a minority in the military in a technical field, same thing, to getting out, to coming back and trying to empower, others, and then looking like, the
danger.
You're high on the horse. You're high on your horse and all this kind of stuff. So it's really, it's all about encouraging, especially our men folks, to understand that what happened, to you maybe when you were young or that abandonment, that should not have happened. It should not have. That does not have to be the rest of your life. That doesn't have to be a cycle. You don't have to continue to be that way. There is an opportunity for you to still be able to feel and to receive and to open up and to be vulnerable and to be helped. Not that all is lost and that, you're hopeless and you're helpless at this point.
And I wonder, I'm all about support, right? That's my big thing. But I also wonder for men, if they're if it's more men in an environment like a group therapy or group support group, are they do they do better with their mental health, right? Because it says I'm not the only one. It's
Absolutely.
kind of like it decreases that male bravado, because it's like, I'm not in here by myself. Because a lot of times when you're in a therapy session, it's like the therapist is the expert, even if you try not to come across that way and that's not your modality, but still they're still looking to you for answers. And so when you have other men, it's like, okay, you kind of are able to kind of let some of that go and say, you know what, he's in here just like me, dealing with the same issues that I am.
Great point, Richelle. I'll just say that one of the most eye-opening experiences I had was a session I had the opportunity to sit on inside of a barbershop. And the barbershop was closed. And it went from maybe 18 guys, and all it took was one guy to say something like, I was molested as a child, and I struggle with that even in relationships that I have now as an adult. And then another guy said, man, that happened to me too. Another guy said, man, that happened to me too. And then it just,
wait a minute.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Did Shulie say 1 minute? All right, she froze.
She froze.
Hold on. You're talking good, Mike. So just hold until we come back from this commercial.
Okay.
You're getting into a topic that we need to talk about because it's one of those secrets in our community. We don't want anybody to miss it.
Okay.
Yeah. We're almost there. Get you a sip of water. Thank you all who are in the audience. We have some people that are commenting. And in 20 seconds, we're going to jump back into this and we're going to pick up to those barbershop conversations. Okay. And we're going to wrap this up. We have 3, 2, 1. And we are back live on HOH 77.7 with Speak It. We are healing us tonight with Mike Dangerfield and Dr. Richelle Whittaker. Before we went to the commercial break, we were getting into something heavy, and we are going to pick up there with these barbershop conversations and our secrets that we need to talk about and address. Mike, you were making a point about a man coming into the barbershop who opened up. Let's talk about it.
Yeah. So let me just frame it. If I give a shout out, let me give a shout out to Andrew Landry. He has a nonprofit called Where Men Hurt, and you know, that's an opportunity for men to talk. And they often do closed sessions in barbershops. I've done kind of live sessions in barbershops. I call it chopping it up, and I'm going when men are actually there getting haircuts, and we're having this conversation, right? So one of these times that I'm referencing right now was kind of a intimate, closed curtain, you know, session where it was the barbershop was closed, and this was an event where men were coming to have this conversation, you know. But even still, this is men in a group, and again, talking is something that we don't generally do. And so I'm in this room, and I'm with the guys, and I'm invited to come, and I'm like Dr. Whittaker said, I don't want to be the expert in the room because I'm usually the one having to, you know, kind of coax people to talk. So I'm there as a man to receive. And it started off with, you know, one person, you know, speaking on the abuse that he experienced, you know, and how it led up. And this was, he said it started early, and this guy, he might have been, you know, maybe in his mid-20s at this point, but he had said that the abuse had just stopped. Like in his late adolescence.
Yeah, what type
of sexual abuse.
Okay.
And he was talking about how it impacted him in his life and his interaction. And then it was almost like a contagion, because from him it went to someone else and said, yeah, I know exactly what that feels like. I experienced that. That happened to me too. I've struggled, you know. And then the conversation went to addictions, like, you know, I have an addiction with sex as a result of, you know, some of what I experienced. And it was just eye-opening to be in this room with these men, you know, who otherwise we'd be, you know, on the football field playing tackle football, you know, trying not to deal with what we're, you know, going through, but to actually have these conversations. And that let me know that in this day and age, men will talk and men can heal. You know, the approach to how we get them to do that just has to be a little bit more organic, you know. So I'm all about that life, like finding ways to meet men where they are. Like I will have a session tossing the football with a guy if that's, you know, what he wants, and we can do that confidentially. Like the importance is let's talk. Right.
I love that, which brings us to this part. Here's the $1 million question. This is what Tony says. What are your best suggestions on how we make it okay for Black men in particular to find therapeutic services? And it sounds like you have already started doing the work on that.
Yeah, now that'll vary from individual to individual. But the biggest thing is connecting and having conversations. For me, I use Facebook as a platform, Instagram as a platform to just throw questions out there sometimes. Like, men, have you ever experienced this? You know, just to get feedback. And then sometimes, you know, I'll get the comments, the DMs, and then I use that to kind of, you know, help them to get a little bit more comfortable. In 2020, men are still not totally open with, you know, putting all of what they experienced out there. But, you know, just being welcoming and reminding them that there is a platform, there is a safe space to come and talk about this stuff where you don't have to worry about being judged. Yes. You know, you don't have to worry about being, you know, this information being used against you and all this kind of stuff. That has been the biggest platform. And also writing. A lot of men are not down with writing at this point, journaling, but that's something once we kind of get the therapeutic relationship going, you know, I challenge them, you know, you got to get that stuff out of here, you know, and get it down. And sometimes that's, you know, through writing.
Yes.
Even, yeah.
And I was going to
Right.
say, I've seen, one of the things that I try to do is, because I don't see men, and I started to see an uptick in men calling, and they want a female therapist. And what I try to do is say, hey, I know here's a list of some therapists, and what is it about a woman? Have you considered seeing a man? And a lot of times they just haven't. It's not that it's because of that, probably because that mother-son relationship and feeling okay to let your emotions go with your mom,
Right.
then for a female therapist. But there are some things that I feel like that as a man, especially an African-American man, that we experience some similar stuff, but as a man, there are some things that I just can't, that I don't experience. And I think
Right.
in some particular instances, a man would be the better suited therapist, for them. But I wonder, how often do they look at that? Because I usually have to say, hey, consider this,
Right.
looking for, a female therapist.
So that goes back to the myth, one of the topic of myths that we talked about earlier. One of them is there's not therapists out there that look like me. This idea of what therapy is and what therapy looks like on TV with somebody sitting down and laying across a chaise and somebody doing like that's not real. So kind of along the conversation, I try to remind men that and I don't just see black men, but that's kind of my target because I really want us to be able to benefit from this. I encourage them to know that hey, there are therapists out here who look like you. There are therapists out here who experience some of the same things that you experience, and so there's not very many of us. But I'm grateful for people like Dr. Whittaker who said, hey, Mike, like I know some men who need some assistance, right? And so we network and we build and that has been helpful.
That's good. We have a comment from Eric to you, Richelle. I guess this would answer your question from a male perspective. Sometimes we seek out female therapists to better understand the perspective of the woman in our lives. Some men blissfully believe barbershop talk is enough.
That's very true. But that goes back to what Mike was saying. It's like he's meeting them where they are. And I think sometimes when with you just being there and just being part of the crew, they're like, okay, well, maybe I can talk to him, or maybe I can go to him for therapy. And then as far as seeing females that's a valid point that Eric made. However, as a therapist, every woman is different, right? So my perspective on an issue, usually I'm not giving advice, right?
Right.
I'm helping to facilitate because I believe the answers are in you. So I'm not giving you my perspective. I can see why that would be a draw for men though. Like, let me go to this female therapist so she can help me in my, marital situation and she can bring that female perspective. So that it makes sense. Although I'm generally not giving.
You're like, still, no. Okay, so as we get ready, we're coming to the end of the hour, and this conversation is so good, and we're going to talk about some points that you all can give us to heal and make it through this situation. But Tam says, how can women support their men who have had to live with these awful experiences? And what do they want us to know but don't have the courage to say? Woo, good one.
How can women, this is one of those conversations, and I've heard this a lot, and I've even had this conversation with my own husband. Some women want to know, we say we want to know the truth, but then when our husband tells us the truth, we get upset, right? So then it makes it a not good space to lay down your burdens, right? So I think as women, we have to do a better job of not reacting or responding so that we create this safe space for our men to, feel comfortable coming to us and, sharing openly, because we're not on the quick response or quick reaction. And then they're just like, oh, this is going the wrong way.
Yeah.
Yeah. A man who jumps out there and finally gets the courage to say something, and then it turns out like that, and then to a therapist of all persons. Like, oh man.
Uh-oh.
Did we freeze? Uh-oh.
I think this conversation needs to continue before we get ready to close out. So what's your social media, Dr. Richelle?
So Instagram, I'm at Providential Counseling, and then my website is www.providentialcounseling.com. That's the same thing for Facebook.
Excellent. What about you, Mike?
You can find me on Instagram at M_Danger the Helper, all together, or heal_die mentality, healthy mentality. Website is www.allintherapy.org because we go all in.
All right. And you guys have gone all in with this amount of time that we have as we get ready to close out. Oh my gosh, this conversation can continue. We have so many components that we can discuss. As far as this, we haven't even talked about relationships for real, for real. That's
part two? Part two, you said?
I feel like we haven't even started. We scratched the surface. Okay, now, as we're going through this time, it's a traumatic time. We're healing from COVID. We have craziness going on in the world. What do we need to do to stay in the right frame of mind? And what are we doing right now?
So I would say, what I have done and what I have, suggested for other clients who are struggling, take a break from social media. Take a break from social media. Give yourself a break, right? Because there's so much it's so much out there. And if you're constantly on social media, you'll be bombarded, right? So I would say, take a break from, my top thing is like, take a break from social media and decide where you want to help. Because what I find people are overwhelmed trying to say, I want to be part of the movement. I don't know how to do that. I don't know where to fit in. And they just don't do anything because they're just so overwhelmed. So I would say decrease, get off social media, take a social media break, and, try to think about ways that you can, if you want to help and you don't want to be overwhelmed, just, if depending on what you do, you may already be helping.
Right. That's good. And I'll add to what Dr. Whittaker is saying. You definitely need to limit that negativity because it's all out there in the atmosphere, especially on social media. But I think we need to do more laughing. Like laughing as a culture is one of those things that just make us feel good, right? So sometimes we gotta be intentional about laughing. And we sometimes miss the good things for all the negativity. So if it's something that you love to do that makes you feel good, like you need to incorporate more of that into your schedule. If you have sensory things like colors that you like to see, music that you like to listen to, just tangible things that are around, incorporate that. Go and paint a room in your house and make that your chill room. Like which COVID has us kind of, hunkered down right now. So use your space and use that to uplift your spirits. And then the last thing I would say is accountability. Like I believe everybody should have some type of accountability partner, whether you're seeing a therapist or not. Like you need someone that you can talk to like on demand and be able to share it, whether it's raw or filtered or whatever. You need somebody to kind of help hold you accountable and vent. So.
Whew. And as we wrap this thing up, I thank you all so much. Yes, to a part 2. You're going to come back and speak it with us. And in the West African tradition, Ashe is the power to speak a thing into existence and to bring about some change. And you all have done that. You've given some nuggets. And until next time, I'm encouraging you all who are listening to go out, use your voice, take care of yourself, and speak it. And until next time, I am your host, Shulie, with HOH 77.7. Have a wonderful rest of your week and happy Juneteenth, everybody.
Yeah, good night.
Bye, y'all.